Well, hello, my name is Roger Casali, and I'm here with Elsa Kvist and Kate Willoughby and Raluca Enescu, three of the remarkable team that joined New Europeans on Parliament Square and in front of Europe House on the 31st of January 2020, when Britain left the political structures of the European Union to protest and to put up signs saying, "Don't make citizens pay the price of Brexit." So we've asked the team to come together, part of the team to come together again at this juncture as Britain is leaving the economic structures of the EU, and to tell us a little bit about themselves, about that experience campaigning with us on the 31st of January 2020, how they feel now and how they see the future. So without further ado, I will introduce the members of the team, and starting with Elsa Kvist.
Hi, my name is Elsa. I'm located in East London. I live here with my husband and my 10-year-old daughter. Looking back at that day on the 31st, I'm a freelance journalist, and I was acting as a press officer for New Europeans that day, as well as a campaigner. So it was a pretty busy day with media from all over the world. Actually, the square itself wasn't that busy. I thought it was busy, but not overcrowded. All the Brexiteers had come out, not that many Remainers, I think, because it was kind of like, let them have their party, as it were. And we were just there to highlight, don't forget about our citizens' rights. You know, we are the people who made our life in a different country. You know, maybe it's time we get the vote. Maybe we need to ensure that we maintain the rights we have to vote in local elections at least, and that our health cover and so forth is assured going forward, and our status.
Thank you. And Kate, how about you? Where are you located? Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, well, I'm currently in London, but I am a proud Yorkshire woman, so I have to get that in there. So yeah, thinking back to the 31st of January 2020, it was a really kind of emotional day. And then in the evening, I'm an actor, writer and campaigner, and I was dressed and then performing as suffragette Emily Davison. And something that really, it was sort of bittersweet, because the sweetness was having people, you know, there was quite a large group of us who gathered at Europe House, and that sort of solidarity, kindness, compassion, looking to the future, and remembering how important it is that, you know, we are friends, that we, you know, we will always remain that. No political barriers that are put up can break our friendship. And there was a point when it's with Raluca, actually, he was really speaking from the heart. And although I was, you know, I was there as myself, but I was actually dressed as Emily Davison, there was a moment when there was some individuals shouting and who had a different opinion to us, probably had a bit too much to drink, and it was quite threatening. And Raluca was on the microphone speaking from the heart, and it just sent me straight back to sort of 100 years previously, and what sort of how suffragettes had been put down largely by men, shouting them down and physically abusing them. And it just felt like a sudden step back to those days, and to see someone like Raluca really holding her ground, and, as I say, speaking from the heart and thinking of the future, because I believe that that positive move is for the future. And those that were shouting and trying to drown us out, their day has gone.
Well, thank you, Kate. Unfortunately, we've got Raluca with us on this call. Yeah. So hello, Raluca, where are you located, and how are you doing? And tell us about your memories of that day.
Yeah, hi, I'm fine. I'm Raluca. I'm a charity worker based in Manchester. And I remember that day. I definitely remember the shouting that Kate was talking about, but that's actually not my most vivid memory. Like the biggest memory that I have of that day is how I ended up sobbing my heart out in the arms of a stranger. Facebook friends. So if Jane Mary Robertson is watching this, hi Jane. And
And it was in the evening during the vigil, so it was very atmospheric in the dark, and we were holding candlelights.
Yeah.
She just came from the crowd and hugged you, didn't she?
Yeah, exactly. No, I did feel being talked over, and I felt grief, but I also felt a lot of solidarity. And the day after that happened, I work for this workers' rights charity called Work Rights Center, where we work with EU citizens a lot and with working class people in order to support them to access employment justice. We have a multilingual workers' rights advice clinic. And the day after the Brexit vote, I had our weekly session. I was feeling like really tired and bummed out, but I dragged myself to the Manchester Central Library where our sessions normally take place. And I helped a young Roma family who had an issue with their landlord. I helped French guy write his CV and find a job. I helped a Romanian builder who was not paid for his services. And then I just went home and I posted on Facebook about my day. And I said, look, no, this is how we will rebuild. We have to keep moving. We have to do something. And in solidarity, I received, I think, over £1,000 in donations.
Gosh.
It's fantastic. And it's interesting that Kate mentioned that she was dressed as Emily C. Davison, the suffragette. And I remember Kate saying, as you were being shouted down, or as they were attempting to shout you down, that you stood in a very proud tradition of women who were being silent or attempting to be silenced and shouted down by men. But of course, they didn't succeed then, and they haven't succeeded now, and they're not going to succeed in the future. And that reminds me as well of how we started the day, Elsa. I mean, we started the day in front of the statue, didn't we, of Millicent Fawcett, the suffragette, on Parliament Square, where preparations were being made for the great, in inverted commas, Brexit party. But we had a very nice photo shoot outside the statue, in front of the statue of Millicent Fawcett on Parliament Square. Can you tell us a little bit about that and your recollections of that? We were mobbed, weren't we? Well, one of our team in particular. In fact, all of us in the end. Yeah. Well, tell us about that.
I thought it was like very ironic that I was talking about our concerns as EU citizens, and somebody who was trying to shout me out was like, his words were like, no, you'll be welcome here, you'll be fine, you have nothing to worry about, but like, in a way that was really shouting me out. So I've never been told that I'm welcome here in such an aggressive way. Very ironic.
Well, we're going to come back to that, because of course
but the thing is, ultimately, I think about those people much less than I think about people like Jane or about the people who donated to the Work Rights Center. They're much less relevant to me.
Love always remains. Love is stronger than hate. And another important word that day was courage, wasn't it? And that was on the banner, wasn't it, Elsa, in front of the Millicent Fawcett was holding on Parliament Square. Tell us about that.
Yeah, we were stood there in the corner of Parliament Square by the statue of Millicent Fawcett. Hope I pronounced her name correctly, Kate. And we were holding up these cards, "Don't make citizens pay the price of Brexit." And we got some lovely photos from that day. And we were suddenly surrounded by media from all over Europe who wanted a little bit that side of the story as well. And some of us were doing individual interviews, and I was trying to coordinate things a little bit, which is hence maybe, you know, Kate and Raluca talk about all the personal emotions. And I guess mine were a little bit suppressed until later, because I was trying to busy myself. And, you know, I did sort of, in the corner of my eye, see some men trembling on the EU flag. And probably normally I would have got, you know, I thought it was disgraceful, but, you know, I just didn't have time to get upset about it. And we kind of just got on with it and tried to tell our individual stories. And at least we got great coverage in Spanish papers, Danish papers, East European papers in Brussels. You were on TV, Roger. Joan, our NHS nurse, was on a lot of Spanish TV and other TV as well, I think.
I think a lot of people didn't realise that although Britain was leaving, there were still so many issues to do with citizens' rights, did they? And I think that's why it was so helpful to have Kate with us and dressed as Emily Davison, because you have to keep fighting these battles, don't you, Kate? How did you feel about the day? And explain to us again about the connection between the fight for women's rights and the fight to protect the rights of citizens, and how important it is that people find their own voice and that they do take arms against a sea of troubles, as the suffragettes did, and as we have to do now. You expressed that so beautifully at the time. Share that with us again today.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it could just be an echo of that. But I think one thing I find, if why I felt there was such a strong connection with what Emily Davison, her sister suffragettes and suffragists were campaigning for, was that right to be heard, to be able to vote. And of course, we're aware that many people weren't able to vote in 2016, and that people moving forwards who live and work here, who've made here their home, are not going to be able to vote. It's such a lot of us still take it for granted. The right to vote is powerful and fragile because many of us carelessly let it go, but it really is fundamental to all our futures, to ensuring that, you know, the country develops as we would hope. And I think that idea of being shouted down, because I would say across a lot of the media in the UK, there was kind of one kind of message. And those of us who had a different message, I'd say a positive message, and one that also spoke from the heart with emotion from a very good place, was very often ignored and drowned out. And that really felt close parallels to what the suffragettes were up against. They were up against wealthy men, mostly, very establishments, who were, you know, doing very well out of the way that the country was, that, you know, perhaps even as we look this year, were making a lot of money. And women were actually standing up and speaking up and saying, look, we pay our taxes, we have a right to be part of the democratic process. And I think it's a strong reminder as well that it's only relatively recently, it's 1928, that women and men in the UK had equal voting rights. So it's less than 100 years ago. And I think it's easy to take for granted those hard-won rights. And it really felt, because I'd written some speeches as Emily, and things would kind of happen on that date, and that sort of tapped in, and I can't really describe it, but as an actor, sometimes you're almost like a channel for that character just in that moment. And there were things that came that I spoke about. Yes, I was speaking them, but actually it was from another time. And I realize that might sound a bit strange, but I promise you, being rooted on the 31st of January 2020, and yet there was this incredible history of women who'd fought for our rights, for all our rights, that somehow kind of channeled into that moment. And that's why there was a power. And that's why I think bringing in drama and creativity is so important for the future, and for rediscovering our empathy for others, and realizing that we do share far more in common than that which divides us. And when you realize that, you can cut through some of the foghorn slogans and see, actually, all our voices matter. And I mean all our voices.
It was a very grey morning, wasn't it? The 31st of January on Parliament Square, physically grey, the weather was grey, but we were feeling also in a sort of darkened mood because Britain was leaving the European Union. And having you there in character as Emily Davison in front of the Millicent Fawcett statue really grabbed attention and helped light up that morning. I mean, literally, because we had the world's press there with their flashbulbs taking photographs as we stood there with our 7 signs saying, "Don't make citizens pay the price of Brexit." And although Raluca has talked about, and we talked about, we'll come back to that in a second, the evening when we were in front of Europe House as the seconds ticked away when Britain actually left. I think by that time, some of the men had a lot to drink, and that coloured their judgment and their behaviour as well. But I think in the morning, we did grab attention, and we did have some conversations, not just with the world press who did get the message that although Brexit was happening, the issue of citizens' rights was still, many issues were still unresolved, just as now many issues are still unresolved, and that citizens must have a voice and their rights must be protected. I think they did get that message. They covered it in their papers. El País and others, Elsa has mentioned, the next day, so we did get our message across. But I think we also, especially in the morning, did have conversations with people who were obviously not at Parliament Square to hear us and listen to us, but to celebrate Brexit, and nevertheless understood that it had to be done in a fair way, in a way that, as you said, made sure that all the voices were heard and that rights were protected. And I think there is a consensus there around that. And obviously people disagreed about Brexit, but I think there's more consensus than is often appreciated around the need to protect citizens' rights. But that was the morning. We then spent the afternoon, I remember, at 4 Millbank. We took shelter from the rain and we had some sandwiches, and we kept trying to sort of get our signs surreptitiously in front of the cameras, because that's where the BBC cafe is. And then we suddenly realized that we were going to have a candlelit vigil and we didn't have any candles. So Rafael, very carefully from Somerset, Rafael Skarbek, part of our team, very helpfully went off on his bicycle and bought 200 candles. And then, so armed with these candles, we went back and we stood outside Europe House until 11 o'clock, and we were the last ones out of Europe. We stood in front of Europe House and we took shelter from these noisy, some of them drunk men who were trying to shout us down after we'd finished what we had to say and film what we had to say, and had a very nice reception from the candlelit vigil and hundreds of people who were there to support it, and the help of the police, who of course formed a safety ring around us. Many police there. We say thank you again to them, allowed us to have our say. We were the last ones out in the end of Europe House. I promised you we would be the first ones back in when Britain joins again. But just again, come back to this, Raluca, you know, those moments, as you say, taking solace in the arms of a stranger. But before you did that, you know, you made such a powerful speech. In fact, as did Kate and as did Elsa. And you know, what remains for you of that of those sentiments today? Are you still? You told us you run a charity in Manchester for workers' rights and so on. How do you see things today as we move towards Britain leaving not just the political structures but the economic structures as well? We still need to keep fighting, don't we?
Absolutely. And I actually thought a lot about something that Els was saying before me, that sometimes you get so busy that you don't have the time to grieve or to feel sorry for yourself. You just have to put yourself out there and make things better if they get worse, because that's the only way. I feel like we have torn down something very valuable, and the only thing that we can do now is start rebuilding it. There's no alternative to rebuilding. And it will be a long and arduous process, but we will go through it and we will overcome. And I remember thinking on that day, even after all of this, even after being shouted at and talked over, I still believe that love is stronger than hate. And I still believe in getting up in the morning and doing the right thing. And that's not something that they can take away from me. And I feel like that's what I've been doing this year.
Fantastic message. And yeah, love is stronger than hate. And of course, it was in many cases love that brought EU citizens to the UK in the first place and British citizens to the EU. And Elsa, tell us a little bit about your story and what free movement has meant for you.
Okay,
How did you come to be in the UK, stay in the UK, and what did free movement give you?
Okay, sure. I mean, I was only 20. I was going to have a gap year. I wasn't going to settle down till I was at least late 20s or whatever. But I met my now British husband in Denmark in the summer of 1992, and ironically, he had. It was the year that Denmark voted no to joining the EU, and we then subsequently renegotiated part of the arrangement and remain part of the community. Well, anyway, I was going to have a gap year, then met Rob that summer, subsequently came to visit him here. He'd been to Sweden for the football, by the way, the European Championship that Denmark won, should I mention. I then ended up having my gap year here and remained. I went to university here. Obviously, I came here. I was able to get a job within 2 weeks, just in a shop, and later in an espresso bar. Went to university here, and I studied European Studies with German, and I went to Berlin for a year as part of my university degree as well. This was another amazing experience. Lived with a couple of German women there and got to know Berlin really well, and made new friendships and learned about German history even more, and experienced that city, which in so many ways represents the layers of European history. And well, then obviously continued my life back here, ended up working at a local paper in the UK some years after graduating. Did that for some 7 years before I went freelance. The Brexit vote happened. Somewhat odd to suddenly have to apply to stay here when you already got a British husband and a daughter. You know, you're giving birth at a British hospital. She goes to the local school. You pay your taxes. It's rather strange. I never had a problem in registering. I think I should have registered properly when I first arrived. I mean, when I started applying for settled status, they couldn't even find me in the system. It bounced back initially, and believe it or not, I've actually been on the same address since '92. I'm still at the same London flat. I still got the same bank account, and I pay my taxes every year. Maybe it's because I'm freelancing and it's a different tax system, but it came back. You put in your national insurance number, and it came back. Computer says no, so no problem. I'll get all my documents together. You know, payslips. No problem. On my records, but you know, and I kind of got over that now. I mean, initially kind of feel it was personal. You know, what you're asking me to apply after all this year, I don't mind registering. In fact, I think you should have done that in the first instance. But like many, of course, I hadn't taken dual citizenship. A lot of people say, oh, why didn't you just take dual citizenship? But until 2015, it would have meant losing my Danish citizenship. It cost some £1,600. In fact, Katarina, who's not here today, she's just completed hers, and and she said it came to as much as £2,000. But anyhow, I've just got these Life in the UK study guide. Came in the post in December.
Goodness.
I ordered those, and then I got the UK test practice questions. So you shall have to see if I pass those, if I know enough about fish and chips. My other half is from Grimsby, so hopefully I've got a chance. Yeah, and what has it changed? So I'm babbling on too much, but of course I was able to come here as a working class girl. I might be from a Western privileged country like Denmark, but my dad was a builder, my mum was a childminder. It just enabled me to come here. I remember other friends in Denmark who were able to go to language school in the UK. I couldn't afford anything like that, but I was able to just pack my bags, get a job here easily. And obviously study in Berlin, which is something, you know, it might be that privileged, very, you know, but I would have thought even for a middle class student is going to, you know, to just go and study abroad like that for a year and you know, not many people will be able to afford that in the scheme of things, I imagine. So, you know, I see myself as very fortunate indeed. And I don't, and one thing I really want to point out was, of course, that immigration was a big issue, and there was very much a sense in the UK that a lot of the working class population had been forgotten about, felt left behind, and I acknowledge that. But if anything, opportunities for everybody are taken away now, and as I know, Kate spent some time in France as well, and there will be, apart from the Irish, who are obviously still part of the European Union, and now Northern Ireland as well, they're not losing the Erasmus scheme, lucky them. So they can still go and experience European culture. And I imagine a lot of Europeans who are very keen to learn English, they will now be speaking with an Irish accent, because they'll now be going to Ireland or Northern Ireland to study now, maybe.
Yeah.
It's an incredible story, Elsa. Thank you very much, and good luck with the citizenship tests. And I'm British, but I wonder if I could borrow those books.
I thought the same. Yes.
So
I'm not sure I would pass the Danish one. The Danish one is also a lot of data.
Well, on those, if I had to pass the test myself. Kate, free movement. I mean, as an actor and performer, free movement is really important, isn't it? I mean, musicians and artists and performers and writers as well are going to find it more and more difficult to move between the EU and the UK. And but there's also a nice story, I think, about one of the suffragettes who had connections outside the UK, and so even in those days, free movement was, of course, not there either, but that was an issue too. But how do you feel about this fact that we're losing free movement between the EU and the UK? I mean, this will have a particular bearing, I think, on British people. I mean, EU citizens, we've heard from Elsa what free movement has benefited her. But as somebody with settled status and an EU passport, Elsa, of course, will be able to move freely between the EU and the UK and within Europe. But I think for a lot of British Europeans, they're in a really tough place now. Life's going to be so much more difficult, just as it was in the days of the suffragettes with visiting people on the other side of the channel. It's almost going to feel a little bit like that again now, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, in all honesty, I think something that's been missing amidst the celebrations of we have ended freedom of movement. I saw New Europeans had done an image, and it's we have ended your freedom of movement. And I read that as mine, as someone who holds a British passport, although I've lived in France, studied in France. And I have to say, December last year, my heart broke. It's that song, isn't it? You don't always know what you've got till it's gone. So thinking about the freedom of movement, I was very lucky. I couldn't have afforded to do it without support. So, but I studied for a year in Tours in the Loire Valley. As a student, actually, I wasn't teaching. Had the most amazing year, and it was much more than, you know, getting a professional qualification. It was, I lived with a family. Funnily enough, they had some other students there. I met people from Canada, Sweden, and it was the most incredible time. I grew as a person. I just sort of saw as well, the big thing that came to me was, yes, there were differences, and obviously the language, and I was learning French, but it was just how much we share, how much in common we have. And to see my dad, a Yorkshire farmer, I get the Yorkshire in again, a Yorkshire farmer, chatting with my landlord, because we were like members of the family, when they came to visit, over a wonderful meal, which I'd helped Christine, our landlady, with. She helped teach me to cook as well. I much better cook thanks to Christine. And they were chattering away and laughing. Neither spoke the other's language, and yet it was just this sort of sharing together, and they were just like old friends, and it just opened up, having that chance to live, study, and then I later went to work actually for a year in France, or nearly 2 years, sorry, I should say. It was just, it's what being a human being's all about, that we're not machines, we're not automats, we're not sort of, you know, little worker bees in a beehive. It's opening up those things that I would never have had those opportunities. I've met people, and I think it opens up and helps with empathy and understanding other people's stories, who on the face of it you might think, oh, them, they. There's a lot of that around, sadly, at the moment, but I would say that was manufactured division, and it's schemes like Erasmus and just the freedom of movement and being able to live and work throughout the EU that actually was part of that original sort of block about Europe, about it being about peace and working together, never again to have a war on the continent. And I do feel that is why it's worth working hard as we are doing, and celebrating all that we share in common, because that in the end, I do feel that it's those things that we share in common. But I do have one thing I do want to say is that the work that I do with Emily Matters, which is an initiative that I run, which is sort of inspired by Emily Davis and the suffragettes and what she cared about, education, voting rights, equality, is that people who have a different view on freedom of movement, on Brexit, in the most part, people voted in good faith, and they voted for what they thought was the best, for the best. And so I think now, for me personally, and I'd urge others to consider it, is to listen, is to rediscover our humility. And it's hard because we have a view of what we feel it would be better, but by opening up to vulnerability and humility, it actually gives us the courage to start to renew and to heal wounds that I would say are caused by manufactured division, by perhaps public figures, people in the media who are making a living at that. And that's why, going back to the grassroots and some projects I'm working on at the moment to do with the environment and what's helped us get through this year, I think rediscovering those, very simple, they're tiny, tiny acorns, but they will grow into great, strong oak trees one day.
Thank you, Kate. There's such a positive message. In every crisis, there is perhaps an opportunity of some kind. I want to move across to Raluca again, and then come back to Kate for a final round. Positive messages. Yeah, you don't know what you have till it's gone. Of course. Is that true? Do you, Raluca? Do you
I think so.
Yeah, and something
Yeah,
positive.
I think so.
Yeah. What do you see looking forward? Yeah.
Yeah, I very strongly believe that there's nothing that can be torn down and cannot be rebuilt again. So I see this a lot about rebuilding. And on some level, I do understand that we need to be very pragmatic about it, and that we will probably need to spend some years thinking about how to mitigate the worst effects of Brexit before we can start thinking about rejoining again. And we will have to spend some time ironing out things like how to prevent this loss of freedom of movement from resulting in more exploitation of migrant workers, for example, before we can start thinking about regaining it altogether. So yeah, maybe on some level people need to spend some time out of Europe and without freedom of movement just to see how bad it is. And it's sad that they could not take experts and citizens at their word when we raise those concerns. But I ultimately believe in rebuilding, but at the same time, yeah, pragmatically rebuilding will be a process of many steps.
Elsa, what comes next? Your positive message, if you have one. I'm sure you have. We all have something positive in this another great day, but nevertheless, looking to the future, what do you see? Is there light at the end of the tunnel?
Picking up from what Raluca said about rebuilding, I very much feel like the European Union grew out of the Second World War, and I saw Britain's role. Britain obviously was very reluctant within within this marriage, but it was that kind of bridge between Europe and America with a special relationship, and the old colonial world and the Commonwealth, and that bridge is now going to be less stable now, I feel. And Ursula von der Leyen said in her speech from Brussels when the deal was announced, that what does sovereignty mean in the 21st century? It means working together. And there are so many issues that bring us together now. Tackling climate change, that's linked to the production of energy, crime, internet crime, just like the railways brought the world together and made people travel. The internet is bringing us all together, and it crosses border, crime crosses border, pollution crosses border. So there's no two ways about it. And I think Britain there might be some positives in the sense that there might be parts of the world that Britain will open up to. Maybe Africa has been left behind, India, Brazil, but it doesn't mean the European Union will still be able to do that. So, and in terms, I worry about food is something I feel passionately about, and I don't think it makes sense to get food from the other part of the world, both in terms of climate change, and coronavirus has shown us that although we need to work together, we also need to be self-sufficient. And, but the positive, to sum it all up, I hope we will rebuild the bridge. I hope we will rebuild the bridge and come together again.
Well, we could talk about this all day, and in fact we are talking about this all day because the vigil is 12 hours long, but we need to perhaps leave it there for now, because we still have so many people who want to share their stories, as you have done, Elsa, Raluca and Kate.
Roger, can I just say about story? Sorry, can I just say about story? I think that's the thing. And when you were talking about, Raluca, about not listening to citizens and experts, it's because there was a very strong story. But we are part of that story. It's a big story. So taking in, for example, from the past, women like Emily Davison, and we're moving forward, and we each have a role to play. So none, we can all do, however big or small, we can play our positive part to help build those bridges and build back together and level up for everybody, not just some, but across the world actually, but with our amazing friends in Europe, and we're coming back.
Exactly, and I think the British government will now have to take responsibility for leveling up, because it can't blame the EU anymore. It was always a national issue of educating, creating job opportunities, that sort of thing,
Raluca, final word from you on free movement for now.
Yeah, it is a time of grief and loss, but I think possibly bit by bit, and possibly as part of a long process, we will regain it.
Europe is about people. Europe is about stories and people's stories. And thank you so much for sharing yours. Thank you again for being part of our Tiger team on Parliament Square and in front of Europe House on the 31st of January. And I can see that your commitment and passion for Europe and European values is undiminished. Europe is wider than the European Union, as we've heard in this conversation. We are the people of Europe, whether we're inside or outside the European Union, we can identify ourselves and call ourselves Europeans. We are Europeans. Europe is about us, the people, and our stories. And thank you so much for sharing yours. And I hope you enjoy the other stories that we'll be hearing in the course of our vigil for free movement as it comes to an end. The free movement comes to the end, but the story of Europe and our place in it as Europeans certainly does not. And we will keep those fires burning and those connections at a human level going for years to come. Thank you very much indeed, and see you again soon. Thank you.